Welcome, Viviane Hagner, here to our virtual Lato summer in the White Stoke Synagogue. And it is a pleasure to invite you as the co-founder and the artistic director of these workshops done in Kreisau. It's fantastic that you engage yourself in this work with young artists from all over the world coming to Poland on the border of the German-Polish border. Every year you do workshops, and then the final concert is, with big honor, done in our synagogue as part of our summer program. It is a great honor, really.
And it's been really a highlight of every summer to be able to visit your synagogue and have our concert at your venue, because it means really a lot to us in many for many reasons. The festival Krzyżowa-Music, or why I had the idea of starting, is it's really two strong connections in my personal life that had somehow come together. One of them being the Marlborough Festival in Vermont in the US, which is probably the oldest chamber music festival or also summer school in the US, which was founded by two musicians who had to flee Europe about 70, 80 years ago. In the Nazi times, it was Rudolf Serkin, the pianist, and Adolf Busch, the violinist, who had played as a duo in Europe, in Vienna and other countries in Europe, who had been very successful and had to escape at that time. But they founded Marlborough Music Festival, and this festival, where I have been a regular participant for a number of years, had been very formative in my musical path.
As a very young girl, you worked with Zubin Beta, or you did your debut very young. 12 years old, playing with the symphony orchestra. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I played a few concerts when I was quite young, and I also had the great honor of being part of the first common concert of actually the first tour of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra to Israel. It was it meant a lot to everyone involved, and I think all the musicians in those both countries. It had, on top of the musical side, it just had a very emotional part of it. These two countries with great musical history and so many musicians who had not seen each other for this time, and who had known each other from the times before the Nazi time. Anyways, this was in 1990, and yes, I was 13 years old at that time, and was
Wow.
this young girl being this little part of what actually was a very important concert.
So this subject of the war was kind of also part of the, like, forming you as an artist in a way. This consciousness of what have happened in the history between Germany and Jews and so on, and the war, like that it was.
Absolutely, I think it cannot not be part of what makes most musicians, and I think me as a violinist, I think one of the strongest influences in the violin playing is really it comes from Russia, Hungary, Austria, Germany, and it just happens to also be the case that it was a lot of Jewish musicians who were just really talented and who really defined the violin playing and music making, and who, when the Nazis rose to power, they weren't allowed to perform, and they what made them the musicians and what gave them, their voice to speak and also to communicate with audiences. All of this was forbidden, and it wasn't allowed. And um, you know, for me as someone who's growing up in these times, and for my colleagues in a similar age, we just take a lot of things for granted. Being able to perform this kind of freedom, and I think uh, in a place like Krzyżowa, Kreisau, which um, where the Kreisau Circle, this important resistance movement, was founded, it really inspires all of us who meet there for the festival to reflect on not just the musical things, but also many things around us, just as human beings, and as what we have as a responsibility as musicians who are actually able, well, except for now in times of the pandemic, but usually who are able to travel and to be ambassadors of what we can do and what we should maintain.
Yes, and you brought this von Moltke Center that we have here in Lower Silesia. You brought all these very young artists, but extremely talented from all over the world, and you bring them around, not only staying in Krzyżowa. In the beginning, you just brought them to Wrocław, but I know you bring them to other places too. And
Yes, this is really what makes me very happy, that musicians who meet in Krzyżowa or play in Wrocław, they really start musical friendships and musical ensembles there, and they also take them out, in other places of our world, and just also become really ambassadors of what they take with them in Krzyżowa.
yes, and of course, it's interesting for them to see this part of the world. I mean, playing, you do also play in the Friedenskirche in Świdnicy, don't you? In this beautiful timber, this amazing church in Świdnicy, this old one. And I think people are very surprised seeing such things in this part of the world. It's a huge revelation.
Absolutely. I think that the Church of Peace in Świdnica is it's really mind-blowing. It's unbelievable to think that this had been built within a year, and I think everyone who's come inside the church and has seen it for the first time is really humbled and just completely taken by its beauty, but also by thinking of what work it must have meant for all these people involved in, building that holy place at that time.
Yes. So, and I feel the same when people come to the synagogue, that they are surprised that it's so light and the colors are white and very positive, because many of the foreigners would think they would come to a very sad place. But the interior is very nice and the acoustic is very good. So it's a lot of emotions that you start with only the venue. Interesting.
It's very true. And I think also in a synagogue, when the cantor is singing, it's all about music, because I think in music so many emotions can be transmitted. And yes, of course, there are also sad ones, but there's also joy, and there's all these different emotions where sometimes words cannot really quite express what one would like to express, or what people actually are feeling. But with music or through music, um, I think the connection to other people is even more direct and is touching people, can touch them, even more. And yes, of course, that's especially true in a place like a church or a synagogue, where I think music is just an ideal means of delivering emotions.
Yes, I am very. I follow your repertoire from year to year. How many times have you been now performing in the synagogue with all? How many times have your concerts been there?
Probably three
Five.
or four times. I think we were, of course,
Yes,
hoping
yes,
we could also come this year, but it's really become,
yes.
it's only our
I
sixth
think
season. So
I think it was the first time in 2016, maybe, when it was the capital of culture. European capital of culture. If I'm not wrong, I have to double check. But the repertoire is always different. And I must say that last year, you surprised me with this Messiaen in the end. It was so absolutely amazing. I was not familiar with this music, but I think it was so quiet in the hall and everybody was so extremely moved. It must be a big experience for your young musicians too. I mean, both bringing this music with its history and on that place.
yes, I think the performance you're talking about, the entire concert, but also the Messiaen quartet, is definitely a performance that I think will we everyone who was there will remember for a very long time. Um, and I think again there were quite a few things that all came together. Being able to prepare and rehearse for this really very big piece in many aspects, because it's so, knowing about the historic background of this piece, where it was composed and under which circumstances. Um, it's just,
You have to tell our audience because maybe not everybody knows the story behind it.
yes, it was actually composed um, on the field of a concentration camp, where the composer Messiaen was interned, is that the word, I think, at that time. And he was writing it for four musicians involved, because every one of these, all the four musicians were also in that
Prisoners.
concentration camp. So it's a clarinetist, a violinist, a cellist, and Messiaen was playing a piano, really a small upright piano, not what you would expect a concert grand. It was freezingly cold. I think at the time they performed, I think it was outside, and not that was just 0 degrees. No, it was actually much colder, and in the winter time, and probably dark gray. So with the situation already being so desperate, and then also the outer circumstances being miserable, and then the story of the piece. Messiaen was a very deeply religious person, and he was writing in this piece about the coming of the angel, and really hoping for paradise really at the end of the piece. But throughout this piece of 8 movements, so it's extremely intense, one really goes through the whole range of I think human emotions, including complete struggle. So it's really, I think, the composer and the musicians, they take any listener through this roller coaster of all the emotions that you can even think of experiencing. And yeah, again, I think having had this very intense time to prepare for it in the retreat of Krzyżowa, knowing about the story of the piece and performing it in a place like the White Stork Synagogue, I think everything came together, and that made it such a memorable performance.
I mean, people work with young musicians meeting together and learning through. I mean, of course, these musicians are mostly focused on their art, When they play and they, like we said, when they come in this venue, it becomes an extra layer. I'm very curious, Viviane, because your violin is so old, 1717. Are you playing on that? Are you rehearsing on that every day?
Yeah, usually I do, yes.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Wow. Wow, that is so amazing. That is what makes Europe also great with these traditions. Very
Yes,
special.
I mean, again, I absolutely do not take it for granted. It's somehow it's a guilty pleasure
Yeah.
that I do it. Um,
I am very also amazed when, learning more about you, knowing that you are a soloist to perform with all the big symphony orchestras around the world, and then you take time to do this workshop project in the middle of the summer.
well,
It's
I have been very grateful for all the support I had as a kid and as a young musician, and to this day, I really make a point of trying to just learn all the times, and this has been my main sources of inspiration, learning from um, my colleagues, of obviously, especially of the ones older, and there are always some colleagues who take an extra interest in supporting the younger ones, and that can be through their musical input. It can be by inviting them to concert opportunities. But without those people, the young ones, yes, the talented ones, they are talented and play well, but they need this. I think they need
mentor.
this, and being able to just be a trigger for bringing those people together. I think yeah, it means a lot to me, being able to, yeah, just maybe this much, give back.
Your sister is also a musician, and you gave an album together. Is your family all musicians, your parents too, or is it only you and your sister?
Um, well, it's only my sister and me who are professional musicians. My parents are very musical. They're not musicians. Um, and yes, it's really me who is just a musician. My sister, she's also a medical doctor and she has tons of talents. And we also
Okay.
have a concert pianist.
Okay. But you started so young. Your parents were really, they wanted you to be a violinist from the beginning because, you start so young. It's amazing.
Well, I think your parents cannot want a kid to become a musician, but I think, of course, it's it's very helpful, and now that I'm also a mother, I know that it's just does so many it just has so many benefits of you know giving your kid access to music. It opens really worlds of you know expressing yourself, and
Yes, and it's of
of course other
course,
kids as well.
but it's of course individual. Some kids continue, and most people don't. But you also have a daughter because when you come to Wrocław, last time your daughter was running around. She must be around 4 or 5. She's also playing now, like you.
I mean, she's playing a little bit of piano, and of course, I don't expect her to become a pianist or a musician. But I think, as I said, ha just having access to the world of music, I think is just amazing. I think it's very helpful, and one should encourage the kids to do that. Any kind of art, really. I think it could be painting, music, all these things. They are essential, really, I think, for children's upbringing. So I can
Yes,
not encourage.
I think art in education is lacking so much. I mean, music has been more specialized for the specialists, and we as kids had a lot of music in school, but everybody knew how to read the notes, and everybody could play the flute. But I think one has to go back to that exactly these creative, of course, some become professional, but it's not only for the professional, it's for the whole, also for our audience to be trained to enjoy our music. They have to be trained. So, yes, and of course, these people on these workshops, they are representatives wherever they go back home in their field.
That's true, yeah. And I think, again, encouraging everyone to take it out into their communities and just spread the word, and just also do, of course, the outreach activities in many aspects of where one can be of help, I think, through music, is something that we're trying to, uh, you know, plant into anyone who's coming to Krzyżowa.
But when you have the Krzyżowa, do you also have lectures there about the musicians and about the place and so on? Do you bring in lectures there too?
Yes, we do. We have 2 evenings, um, one evening a week, where we actually focus on different themes. It can be musical themes, like musicians in exile. We've had some, very important musicians featured, also with, how do you say that, witnesses from
Mm-hmm.
times, who had personal connections with these persons. It can be, and it has been, on historic themes, from, for instance, last year we had, 1919 and 2019, kind of starting that era 100 years ago, and looking at the world nowadays. And yeah, it's been, I think, a very important part also of our workshop. Um, what I was, mentioning in the beginning, to make everyone reflect about these things as well. And I think, in this sanctuary kind of, this retreat of Krzyżowa, where, all the musicians, I think they feel, um, yeah, free and open to really tell about their opinions, and which are very diverse, obviously, because they come from so many different countries, from so many different cultural backgrounds. And there is not one right answer to a question, and it's quite the opposite. And I think it's always, mind opening, for everyone who's part of these symposiums, to learn about other people's opinions, and to share them and to discuss them. So those 2 evenings that we have, they usually are just the beginning of many, many discussions we have outside the rehearsals, in long evening discussions, and continuing outside the festival. And it's become a very important part of the festival.
How many musicians, how many young musicians join the workshop every year, and how do you recruit them for the work, for joining in?
Yes, we've had, I think, around 50 musicians altogether for the duration of the 2 weeks. And between 10 to 15 of them we call the senior artists, the the more experienced, usually older ones, who I invite, and and then the 35 more or less young musicians who apply to our festival. And Matthias von Hösen and I, we've just been extremely lucky to have, actually, from the very beginning, just have had a extremely high level of applicants, um, who have, through mutual friends, heard about this new festival in, in this smallest place you can even think of. I think nobody really could have even heard of it. Um, and it's kind of a mystery, somewhere in the middle of Poland. Um, I think that's what it feels like for anyone coming there for the first time. And then, once they are there and they see what they what they are what they've come to, first of all, usually they say, "Oh, it's not that far from, I don't know, Germany or.
It's not far from Berlin at all. It's just a few hours by car.
Yes. So first of all, they say, "Oh, it's not so far," and then they say, "How beautiful!" And then, with the few you mentioned the piece of church. Obviously, Wrocław is a huge cultural city, and I think for most of our participants, or at least for many, it's the first time they've seen it, and there's so much to discover. Culturally, musically, of course, and also the landscape. So. Yes, it's we are only in our 6th year, and the word spreads quite fast amongst musicians, and yes, I think it's becoming less and less of a mystery.
Yeah.
People start to know about it.
And it is fantastic also because our foundation is all about, mutual respect, building bridges between each other, and from the beginning, we cooperated with the Krzyżowa, with Kreisau, very important, for those who don't know, von Moltke, the center of the family, the one who fought the Nazis, and the family. I just wanted to say, I listened to you on the YouTube, and I heard just a month ago you did this solo Bach in the Konzerthaus in Berlin. Amazing. I really, everybody should go on YouTube and try to find it. It was very, very special, Viviane. And you are a fantastic artist, and thank you for doing such an initiative like the workshop in Kreisau every year. And next year, I really hope that I can say, like you say in Hebrew, B'shana haba beWrocławiu. It means next year in Wrocław.
Well, thank you so much for having had such strong relation to our festival, and I also wish you, of course, that you can resume having real events with people again soon.
Yeah. It's only, I think art is only with direct contact with people. I cannot imagine otherwise, but I'm old-fashioned.
Well, in that respect, I'm also old-fashioned.
Thank you, Viviane. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bente. Bye-bye.
See you next year. Bye. Thank you.